afternoon, good evening from wherever you're dialing in. Thanks for joining. Just a quick introduction on myself. Natasha Adams, originally from São Paulo, Brazil. Have made my way over to Denmark, Copenhagen, where I'm currently the VP of marketing for Falcon.io. We're a social media management tool. We're owned by Cision, an American company, just bought us a couple of months ago. So I actually work with PR professionals and social media professionals around the world. So really happy to have this opportunity to chat with you guys, especially in uncertain moments like today, and see what we can help you with in terms of developing either social media strategies for crisis management or just enhancing what you're currently doing. So what I thought of doing it is keeping it very high level, walking through a couple essential components of what I believe you need, regardless of where you are with social media today. And then anecdotally talk about a few brands that we serve globally, as well as in Europe and across different globes. Try to see as much as I can do around the travel and hospitality space, but also bring stories that actually talk through what are the pain points brands are going through and how they're solving it through social media management. So one of the first things, that I look at as a VP is always, we have grandiose ideas of what we would like to do, because in marketing, obviously, there's so many things that we can do. But the first thing I look at always is what support do you currently have, right? So looking at the structure of your marketing team, looking at the structure beyond your marketing team, what other voices do you have in the company? So on sales side, product side, your executive team, how plugged in are they to social in terms of communications and the channel? Is this a focus for your company, right? I think that's another determining factor. Budgets obviously are super important too. And that will start to define on, first of all, how big of a scope can you handle? And what actually makes sense for where you are today as a brand. These are actually discoveries we do with a lot of our customers today. When they pick up the phone, because obviously, like us, our competitors, the same, have various types of solutions that we can sell into our customers. And if we don't actually narrow this component down, you can end up selling someone a Rolls Royce when, in fact, you really don't need that, right? Or you undersell and not give brands the ability to move forward. So I think that's really, really important. And just kind of anecdotally, I have a rule with my team. It's like when you think of an idea, look behind your back and think, how will it get executed? And if the answer is, I have no idea, then I think that's the first problem to solve, which is hopefully, what I'm getting to over here. The other part is, obviously a strategy, right? So this goes to me beyond marketing. When I look at marketing, we are no longer a service center for companies. We are here to drive demand, which essentially is revenue for companies, right? And within that, social plays a big part on a communication standpoint, on a brand strategy, brand awareness, revenue generating, how you manage communities online. So within that breadth, what goals do you want social to play within your business? And again, how far can that gamut go, right? So I'll give you some examples. For example, one of the largest pizza delivery companies on the globe, Domino's, came up to us and said, "Hey, we find a need to be able to get back to our community in less than 15 minutes, right? So everything from I received the pizza, I'm not happy with the pizza, so I don't call a 1-800 number. I actually go on Twitter or Facebook and directly complain." Or into an app-based solution that Domino's had. They wanted an ability to, within 15 minutes, get back to that member of the community with an answer, right? And be extremely proactive. If you take Toyota, for example, which is a massive car manufacturer and brand, we play on their end of spare parts. And what they use us for is essentially listening as a listening tool. And then, of course, an engagement and demand tool, where they go on Twitter and different, obviously, social channels, and they start to figure out what are people looking for, right? So are there specific auto parts that people are looking for, problems they're having with Toyota parts? And within that, start to gain market intelligence and proactively then disseminate this intelligence across different teams that can proactively solve the problem. So if this problem them could be, hey, we're hearing that the pressure of the tires are becoming a problem with the new Prius models, and that's what seems to be an active chat. Then that gets disseminated to the community teams that manage this, and then obviously the product teams, and the quality control teams, and so forth. So those are some examples. We've had example in the hospitality industry with the Radisson Group, for example, that they use a lot of social strategies as exits, right? So people want ratings and reviews. So being able to give a lot of the people that actually frequent their properties, whether they are frequent members, whether they went to one of their resorts, and through social being able to rate certain properties, photos and properties, and have more of an interactive approach versus a static email approach. So various use cases, and I think defining what problems you want to solve, what areas you want to tackle first, also gives you a sense of what social media marketing goals you want to augment for your company. And of course, those can be very narrow as well as extremely wide. The other component is understanding your target audience, right? Like I said here, if you take the example of Toyota, their audience was really defined. It was an audience that owns Toyota vehicles that are actually looking for either parts or having problems with Toyota parts, or are investigating where they can get serviced. So that's extremely targeted, and that's what they're going after, right? So they set listening components, they set hashtags and keywords that they're looking for. With Domino's, it was more open. It was any chat you hear on a pizza delivery that arrived to someone who's eating a Domino's pizza. We want to know about their experience if they're talking about it, depending, irrelevant of what channel. We have travel industry, airline industries that are using it for customer service inbounds. If you think of, not today's reality, but if your flight gets delayed or gets canceled, very few people now stand in line to wait. What is an airline going to do? You hop on the phone, you go online, you start to try to proactively change your reservation. But another big component is you're actively messaging online, right? Whether it's my flight got canceled, there's a disruptive component of the airline, and social media is where they're actually going in, your audience, your constituents, and actually making live complaints, right? So having that right social strategy in order to deal with these inbounds and manage to obviously proactively have the right messaging to your constituents is really important, not only for crisis components like today, but just to manage your target audience. So understand who they are, what you're trying to do with them. Are you trying to sell to them? Are you trying to be more service oriented to them? Are you trying to have them understand who you are as a brand? And within that, obviously, messaging to them correctly. I'm looking at my phone because I'm filtering to see if there are any questions. They're coming in through my WhatsApp, so feel free to submit questions as I'm going through this. Other component with social is what do you want to measure and why? Social, if you look at social 10 years ago, it was a very fluffy ROI to prove. When you sat in front of a CMO, and then of course the CEO who's looking at the top line and bottom line, they're looking at, hey, what is this social thing? Why do we have to be in so many channels? Why are we spending so much money on content? What are we really driving here? And today you can get to very key defined ROIs, right? You can get to defined ROIs as simple as how many people are engaging with your content, how they're engaging with your brand, how they're engaging across your competitive set, what kind of content they're engaging towards. Engagement is also measured in direct revenue impact, right? Where you actually have a shopping cart link. We measure engagement through demo flows in a lot of our social paid activities. And if that demo then equates to a booking, which equates then to a final buy, that's a direct revenue impact into our social strategy. So there are various ways to measure, and I think you need to define that from the beginning. The set of tools you buy will also help you augment how you can measure things and to what extent you can measure them. And again, this is really important, right? The vitality of being amplifying your social, amplifying your content. These are expensive touch points within marketing, and knowing how to do this and doing it correctly will only give you more support within your organization And when your CMO or your VP are fighting for that budget, there's a very clear ROI metrics towards that. Competition is really important. There are benchmarking tools out in the market. There are listening tools in the market, which allow you to understand what is your competitor doing. Beyond that, it allows you to understand what are other related industries doing, right? So if you're in travel, you might not only want to know what your direct competitors are doing, but what are other areas of the travel sector and hospitality sectors doing around social? What kind of posts are engaging the most and content? What kind of conversations are happening, right? So there's a lot of listening and monitor that goes on there. What influencers are in the space that actually makes sense for us to tap into? What are brands that we could potentially partner with because they actually make a holistic synergy online and in this digital space? So a lot of our customers use this quite frequently. We have fashion brands that have been using this. So H&M is an example of a brand in here in the Nordics, within strategic partnerships with designers, with influencers in the space of designers. And they do this actually by benchmarking and also listening to their space. They do online contests with this, and you can see when you match them against other competitors like Zara that go head to head with them here in Europe, you can see the peak of influx on doing this strategy in terms of melding the right partnerships, melding the right influencers, doing these online contests. How during these peaks, the brands obviously have a very desperate fluctuates of results, right? And this is happening not only obviously in fashion, it happens across all industries. In the B2B space, there might be some marketeers here in B2B. It's super important too. I mean, we are in the B2B space. We obviously serve various brands. I've been in the B2B space in other brands. But again, I think you can use social monitoring for competition on your direct competitors. You can do it on channel specific, right? So if you're looking for talent, for example, it's really good to see what is your competition doing on LinkedIn, for example, to poach the better talents. It could be as strategic as market-specific intelligence, right? So if you know you want to gain market share, let's say somewhere in Asia or in a specific European market, you could actually do some intelligence and competitive analysis that are very specifically driven in markets and for specific even products and solutions. So it's a very cool attribute in social that brands are starting to get into. But going back to kind of that first conversation on the first slide is, what is your team structure, right? Do you actually have sort of a BI data analytics person that could actually take this and do something with it? So on your content strategy, on your go-to-market strategy, you actually are going in with a little bit more intelligence instead of being blindsided. I'm just checking to see, sorry, if there are any questions here coming in. I don't see any yet. Content, that seems to be something that every single brand, whether you're B2B or B2C, struggles with. Previously to this job, I ran a startup for Kodak called Kodakit, which essentially was a marketplace for photographers and brands, with the premise of actually trying to solve some of this problem in giving brands access to photographers, videographers, and artists locally at speed and low cost, right? You'll see other companies doing the same, Snappers of the world and Miros of the world. That's one solution. I don't think you'll ever be able to, as a brand, hire enough people to produce content that you need as a brand in today's world. COVID obviously changed this a little bit with us consuming content even more. It's increased by 70% just because we are stuck, confined. We are confined to screens all day. And then obviously as the world resets, this will decline. But we know that content is king, and we know that producing this content is really, really hard to do. We obviously, together with our competitors, offer ways in which you can actually discover through competitive analysis better content to produce, so that you can obviously streamline that a little bit more. So you know what works, for example, why it's working, what others have been doing, and what could you potentially jump on the bandwagon with. Like I said, partnerships, I think, is a great opportunity for content development. Being less formal about your content today works tremendously in social. So that whole UGC, where we are actually changing some of the dynamics, and we see them even with our brands, where CEOs today are picking up their mobile, they're creating their own sort of selfie type videos, posting them online. So less of that stage environment, and a much easier way to produce content on the fly. That's number one, it's authentic because it's coming directly from the source. And it's produced in very inexpensive ways, and ways consumers actually want to see today. Okay, so I don't see that there's any questions yet, but please, jump in if you have any questions. What we see also with some of our brands in terms of trying to work this content map out is actually using tools that help you actually pre-plan, right? So you're not constantly trying to firefight what goes out. And we saw companies, especially now during COVID, having to re-engineer entire campaigns because obviously what they were producing out in the market was no longer relevant in today's world. So being able to do this on the fly was hard. So I guess what I'm trying, to say, we've seen less stringent, more dynamic, more personal, and it comes back again to your front slide. Is your leadership team bought into this? Do they believe in social? Are we enabling your leaders within product, within sales, to actually develop content across your corporation? So it's not only a singular voice coming from marketing, but across the company, as well as your customers, as well as even some of the users of your products and services, to actually add that component to what you do. One thing we've done very successfully is actually even teaching our outbound team, our SDR team, on social selling. So as simple as picking up a phone, creating a quick intro. Hey, my name is Jack. This is what I do. This is how I'm trying to help you. And instead of sending those static emails, it's a video that goes into Sales Loft. It's a video that is uploaded more on a generic content into LinkedIn and targeting specific audiences within LinkedIn Navigator solutions in sales components. So there are a lot of other tactics too that might not be so open, that are in a more closed environment, that have also worked tremendously well for brands, both in the B2B and B2C space. But you see a lot of social selling in the B2B space becoming a very big attribute for outbound teams and also inbound teams. Just checking to see if there are any questions coming here. So how important is keywords in social media? I think, well, it's extremely important, right? It's going to help you define competitive sets. It's going to help you define areas that you're trying to narrow down into. It's going to help you define how far you want to stretch out to. So defining those keywords are really important. It's going to help you be, I guess, spend less money on paid, right? If you are doing paid on social, it's going to help you target audiences more specifically. So I'll give you an example of how we had to react in COVID, right? So we used to do, because we're targeting social media managers across pretty much any industry. We are industry agnostic. We have specific markets we go after, which are 4 markets across the world. And we have company sizes that we go after, but we are a mid-market player. We play with some enterprise customers. And one thing we did with COVID was we knew that, for example, unfortunately, the travel and hospitality industry would not be spending as much as they were spending. We also knew that on the flip side, there were other verticals that actually needed to jump into social strategy a lot faster. And this crisis of COVID have had to change in a faster way. So we very quickly changed into a very vertical focus strategy in e-commerce, as you can imagine, FMCG, NGOs, government, especially in public health sectors, health insurance companies. And within that, obviously defined a subset of keywords, a very tailored content to that audience, to then obviously monetize and help industries and verticals that were going to keep us afloat for the next 6 to 8 months. So keywords in that respect and targeting that audience was key for our success and where we're going today at Falcon. And then I guess the last part that I wanted to talk a little bit about, which goes back to the first slide, is assessing your results, right? As you're doing things, campaigns, as you're creating strategies, as you're building teams around what you do in social, things will work, some things won't work. You might have areas that are working extremely well and you need to amplify those areas. And this journey is never ending. We have customers today that might have 200, 300 seats, meaning that's how many people are using our product. We have some that are 5 to 10. So obviously that also works on what kind of use cases these brands, what are the problems they're trying to solve on social. So defining that first, the landscape of what you're trying to do, then kind of re-looking at where are you going with this? Are you actually moving the needle? Are you helping your constituents? If it's a service-oriented component, if it's a brand awareness and engagement component, if it's just, quite frankly, helping you as a workflow tool. So what are the things you're trying to solve? How are you actually measuring them? And where do you actually take this journey on to the next step? To me, social is not a simple 1, 2, 3. It's defining that vision of where you want to go, and within that vision, creating the milestones to get you there. Maybe I'll work on a use case here since we have time. There was an agency that we worked with out in Barcelona, and they were having an issue with their clients. They were primarily working just to service all of the inbounds for some of their customers. Their customers were large B2C brands in Spain, and their constituents were using social media channels to talk about their problems, issues, or even what they wanted to say about the brands and their experiences through social. They weren't using any customer service tools. It was pretty much on Twitter, I just bought these pair of jeans, not very happy with them for X, Y, and Z reason, right? And they were having random inbound requests and shout outs happening across various channels. So they hired this agency in Spain, who then hired a bunch of people and were on a native perspective going in and channel by channel, person by person, responding to all of these inbounds. Of course, this became extremely cumbersome to manage because it's you log in, check what the message is, you go in, you do a response, you log out, then you log into the next one. So when you're doing hundreds of these, thousands of these, if you're hit by a crisis, it's totally not scalable. The content team in the agency that were handling these inbounds were not feeling relevant. It was a really shitty work experience, right? You're just constantly doing a mechanical day in, day out, and they actually wanted to solve bigger problems. They actually wanted to use their creativity as content leaders. So we went in there and helped them create team structures, create automatic messages, responses that responded to certain keywords, and within that, obviously streamline their workflows. Obviously help the brands because the brands were now responding to inbounds within 10 to 15 minutes, when in the past it was taking them 24 to 48 hours. So they lose that engagement with that direct audience. And then for the actual agency, it was curious because they weren't getting any more friction in their employees, right? Before, they could only hold their employees for 3 to 6 months. And as business leaders, you guys know how hard it is to hire good people, let alone retain them at work. So it was also an area that we helped create a better work experience for these content managers who are now working on strategy, who were working on great content pieces, how to create more engaging messaging, because the whole workflow was taken care of. And then, of course, you have a happier constituent because they get an answer, and they get an answer within 15 minutes. I'm just going to check to see if there are any other questions. So a question from Daniela: what sort of post should we be doing now? I think that's an interesting question. We get that a lot in our strategy team that get inbounds. The one thing we've seen that is working is be truthful. So I think, first of all, set the tone as a brand, and what are you doing during this crisis? How are you helping your people in the company. I think that's been a very strategic area that's worked really, really well. Is first of all, people want to know, what kind of company are you? How are you treating your employees? And how are your employees working through this crisis? It gives you that brand presence and validation of who you are in the market. So if you are doing something good, if you are, for example, not laying off your staff, if you are doing CSR activities with frontline workers because you have the ability to produce masks or to give them software or services for free, you should be letting people know this, right? This is a good outreach that you're doing as a brand. Being sensitive is critical. I think the last thing people want to see is that you're actually trying to be a money gouger out of people in this time. But how can you, if you are a brand that has the luxury today to actually make money in this crisis, what else are you doing? How are you helping people, right? So I saw a great example of Burger King in Spain, who saw that truck drivers had an issue where a lot of these places that they go to eat are closed, right? These are usually mom and pop establishments, and the bathrooms are closed. So Burger King actually went out in Spain and developed an app for the truck drivers just to be able to pre-order food based on their destinations. Also gave them the ability to know where in these areas in Burger King they could actually go to a bathroom, because they had just left facilities open for truck drivers, and made a whole social campaign just in Spain, and not really about, hey, buy a burger from us while you're driving your truck, but here's what we're doing to help you be able to eat, wash yourself, take a shower, whatever the facilities could offer as you go through your journey in being a frontliner in the supply chain component. So it was a really good way of Burger King sending that message, and I think worked extremely well. I'll just check for any other questions. Turan, is there a power of promotion in social media? Yes, for sure. Promotion can happen in various vectors, right? I think one is brand awareness. So who are you? What do you do? What do you stand for? And what is your company? That happens with content. That happens obviously with a lot of paid components, which can be expensive. But that's where obviously a lot of the networks today and channels make their money, right? Is amplifying that message and getting directly to the person, your target audience. Advertising helps, right? So we do this a lot. We reach out to individuals like yourselves, to social media managers through paid and search. And we try to drive you to read top funnel pieces on social media and on Falcon, as well as hit the demo button to hopefully get interested in reading about us and taking a spin, and then obviously buying our solutions with that. So social is a great demand revenue driver today, and there are tools in place that actually measure your ROI. If you're in fashion, for example, whether you're using Pinterest, whether you're using Instagram, you can actually direct into an e-commerce checkout. So you go from an ad directly to choosing your size to buying the product and service. So it can be extremely powerful, and that direct link to cash is getting more and more efficient. I had seen that there was another question from Stefania. Any advice on personal branding? Yeah, so we do this a lot as leaders. So I can show you, like, on an executive leadership standpoint, we do this with our companies. And I'll give you actually an example of what we're starting to do for Volkswagen. So Volkswagen was having issues with their execs who had things to say, wanted to share, obviously thought leadership pieces, but are not socially savvy, right? So we actually helped the PR and comms team within Volkswagen create specific profiles for their executives and specific topics, and obviously content that would augment what that exec stands for, number one, as a person, then as an executive, and as a leadership role within Volkswagen. So we have some interesting projects where, some leaders go really deep into their CSR journeys. Some of them are more into their hobbies and activities to put more of a person behind who they are. And then, of course, thought leadership conversations within the auto space, within manufacturing in general. Today with COVID, they talk a lot about supply chain and how they're actually going to get back on their feet and what they're doing as a brand to help. And it's coming actually from the leaders, right? So I think whether you're a CEO of a company, whether you own your own personal brand, you can use social in various factors. Again, people want to know what's behind that brand and authenticity. So the more you can be in front of them and show who you really are, social plays a big element there. Let me see if there are any other questions. Now, on the personal branding part, I can also share a personal example that we had in the old company I worked for. We took a CSR initiative for an outfit out in Thailand that takes care of intercepts women before they're sold into slavery and become sex slaves as early as the age of 4. And we actually worked together with them and our photographer network that we had in that time of about 100,000 photographers to use photography as a power to show the importance of women, to show the importance of leadership of women. So there was a beautiful visual component to it. And then, of course, an awareness component to show why are these organizations important? Why maybe you should forfeit having a $5 Starbucks for as you're walking with a friend, and maybe put a kid through school in a year with that money and give them papers. So rather than just being that, hey, I want this from you so I can put this person in school, through photography and through content, we did a great campaign that went not through what we were trying to do as leaders, but as photographers who were in Thailand, who were frontline dealing with this social problem, actually promoting themselves, the beauty of CSR activities like this. So I think that personal branding can happen in various elements and various components. I think there's another question coming in from Lena. Can we use influencers in a niche field like hospitality, software, technology, B2B? Yeah, for sure. I'll give you an example of what we just did for ourselves. When we launched, we do really well in our trends pieces in the beginning of the year, where we tell social media managers what we believe the 2020 trends will be. And this year was the first time that we actually tapped into an influencer, Matt Navarra, and we invited him to actually host a webinar with us. We invited him actually to help write some of the top trends pieces, so that it wasn't just us as a software provider telling you what we believed, but it was actually industry experts coming in and doing that. The results were incredible. So just on a webinar perspective, last year when we did the webinar ourselves, I think we had an essence of 500 plus people register, maybe 100 people join. We amplified the results by 4,000 plus people registering and almost 1,000 people joining. The downloads of the trend pieces 10x'd. So influencers in the space help a lot, right? It's again that component of bringing subject matter experts, that it's not a brand talking down to a potential target audience for a consumer. You're bringing people that they respect, right? You're bringing people that they want to listen to. And this helped us tremendously. We see our customers doing this a lot within the fashion space, technology space, in the auto space. We see it a lot. We just had a couple of webinars that we witnessed, and even social components with crisis management experts that companies are hiring to help craft their messages, be frontliners in during COVID-19. So for sure, influencers, if done correctly, I think can be a tremendous asset for you in this space for B2B. So Rita, I don't see any more questions coming in. I don't know if you have anything that you want to add. because I'm coming to the end. So if no one has any questions, I think, you know, for one thing, I will come. I've worked in all different stages in marketing. I've had my own businesses. I've worked in early stage startups. I've worked in multi-billion-dollar corporations. I now work for Falcon, which is a smaller business unit within obviously a much larger company. You can always start. So I know I talked about very large brands. You might be an entrepreneur with your own business, but don't think you need to have all of the attributes, a massive team, a lot of money to start. There's always things you can do to get started in social. So kind of that's why I put this slide on. If not now, then when? You've got audiences using social and engaging in social more than ever, right? Not only to understand what's happening, what do you stand for, where are you located, what do you do, but hey, I'm not happy with you and I'm telling you why, right? It's become a very public channel, both on an outbound and an inbound perspective. You've got obviously a matrix of different types, right? Visual, written, video. So of course it can be scaled to a completely robust solution like we have with customers like Toyota, Domino's Pizza, but also a lot smaller. We work with NGOs today that are primarily just doing frontline crisis comms with their inbounds. So very tailored, small parts in social. We work with brands that are just doing awareness campaigns. We work with other brands that are just doing influencer plays on social. So I think it's, again, going back to that first component of the conversation, define your scope first, define your journey, because that journey will never end. It's getting even bigger and bigger. What can you actually do? Because it becomes really fun when you have an idea, you execute it, it works, you measure, you get buy-in from the top, they give you more money, and you just keep expanding it. So keep it simple, execute, drive the results, and then keep growing on it. That would be kind of my end comments here. Let me see if we have any other questions. If not, Rita, I'm finished my presentation.